This is a photograph of a monster that kills you just by looking at it. This is the work of a celebrated genius who got away with murder. And this is the lie that fooled the world's greatest detective for over 60 years. We think of photographs as moments of truth, captured in time. But what if the most important images in history weren't discoveries, but crime scenes? These are the photos that change science, and the terrifying stories hidden in the shadows. The face of Medusa. This photograph should not exist. The grainy texture and ghostly blurs are not flaws in the film, they are the physical scars of pure radiation, an invisible force so powerful it burned through the celluloid just moments after destroying the camera itself. The image shows the elephant's foot, a monster born in the heart of the Chernobyl disaster, and to look upon it is to witness a man-made Medusa. Deep in the labyrinthine corridors beneath reactor number 4, in a steam pipe accessway, sits this grotesque mass. It's a solid, multi-layered flow, wrinkled and grey, like the hide of some primordial beast. Scientists gave it a name that was both mundane and terrifying: corium. Before 1986, it was a substance that existed only in the theoretical nightmares of nuclear physicists. It is a hellish cocktail of melted nuclear fuel, control rods, and whatever else was in the reactor's path: concrete, steel, sand, all fused together by a heat that rivaled the surface of the Sunday. During the meltdown, this searing river of radioactive lava melted through the reactor floor and feet of reinforced concrete before finally coming to rest, cooling into this monstrous shape. When it was first discovered months after the disaster, its power was absolute. To stand in its presence for a mere 30 seconds would cause dizziness and fatigue that would last a week. 2 minutes would cause your cells to hemorrhage. 5 minutes was a death sentence, with most victims perishing in under 2 days. The photo itself is a testament to human audacity and desperation. It was taken years later by Artur Korneyev, who had to rig a crude system to push a camera on a wheeled stand around a corner, snapping a picture before retreating. He captured the face of a new kind of terror, a physical object that kills from a distance. Decades later, the elephant's foot remains where it came to rest, still warm, still emanating a lethal aura, a monster we created but cannot cage, sleeping in a concrete tomb of our own making. It forces us to confront the terrifying question: what other demons have we created that are still waiting in the dark? The elephant's foot is a monster that kills from a distance. But our next story is about a man who met this invisible force face to face, and the horrifying scientific record of what happened next. 83 Days of Hell. This photograph shows a man named Hisashi Uchi. What it cannot show you is that at the moment it was taken, his genetic code, the very blueprint for his body, had been completely erased. The story of how doctors kept him alive for 83 days would redefine the absolute horror of radiation poisoning and pose a terrifying question about the limits of medicine. On September 30th, 1999, Ouchi and 2 co-workers at a Japanese nuclear fuel plant made a catastrophic error. While mixing a uranium solution, they used 7 times the legal limit, creating a critical mass in an improper container. A brilliant blue flash erupted, the telltale sign of a nuclear fission chain reaction. Ouchi, who was draped over the tank, absorbed an estimated 17 sieverts of radiation. For context, a dose of 8 sieverts is considered 100% fatal. He had absorbed more than double a dose that guaranteed death. When he arrived at the hospital, he seemed relatively unharmed, but a look at his cells under a microscope revealed a scientific nightmare. His chromosomes were shattered. His body had lost its instruction manual for life. It could no longer create new cells to replace dying ones. What followed was a slow, agonizing disintegration. His immune system vanished as his white blood cell count dropped to 0. His skin, unable to regenerate, began to blister and slide off his body in sheets, requiring massive and ultimately futile skin grafts. He suffered from uncontrollable bleeding, both internally and externally, losing liters of fluid through his pores. He was no longer a patient to be saved, but a specimen to be studied. Despite his pleas to let him go, he was kept alive through an agonizing series of experimental treatments, blood transfusions, and resuscitations. The photographs and records from his ordeal became a grotesque but invaluable scientific document on the effects of acute radiation. His body was a living laboratory, a testament to a unique form of scientific torture. After 83 days of unimaginable suffering, his heart finally stopped for good. His ordeal leaves us with an ethical nightmare. At what point does the quest for knowledge become a unique and unforgivable form of torture? Hisashi Ouchi's story was a sudden, brutal lesson in the horrors of radiation. But decades earlier, an invisible killer was invited into the homes and painted on the lips of hundreds of women who were told it was the light of the future. The light that kills. The women in these photos were considered the lucky ones. In the early 1920s, they landed coveted jobs working with a magical new element, earning excellent wages painting watch dials with glowing radium paint. They were known as the Ghost Girls because after their shifts, their hair, skin, and clothes would shimmer with an ethereal light, a beautiful glow that hid a monstrous secret. Radium was the wonder element of the age, and this was high-status work. At factories across the country, hundreds of young women sat in studios, carefully painting tiny numbers on watch faces. To get a fine point on their brushes, they were taught a technique called lip dip paint. With every lick, they swallowed a small dose of deadly poison, all while their managers assured them it was perfectly safe. For fun, they would paint their teeth and nails, arriving at parties with radiant smiles and shining fingertips, oblivious to the fact they were decorating themselves with their own poison. Then the toothaches began. The pain was followed by ulcers that wouldn't heal and a horrifying decay of the jaw. The condition became known as radium jaw. The science was terrifyingly simple. The human body mistakes radium for calcium, embedding it directly into the bones. From the inside out, the constant radiation bombardment was drilling through their skeletons. Their spines would crumble under their own weight, and their jaws would become so diseased and brittle that they could be pulled away with a gentle tug. The companies knew the dangers. Internal studies had confirmed radium's lethal effects, but this truth was deliberately and systematically suppressed. They tried to discredit the women, claiming their illnesses were the result of syphilis, not their work. But the Ghost Girls fought back. Terminally ill and horrifically disfigured, they took their employers to court. Their courageous legal battle became a national sensation, exposing the company's lies and the gruesome truth of radium poisoning. Their photos, capturing vibrant young women on the brink of a horrific decay, became a permanent record of corporate greed. Their fight led to landmark labor safety laws that protect workers to this day. Their sacrifice forces us to ask, how many of the modern comforts we enjoy today are built on a foundation of forgotten victims? The Radium Girls died because a corporation deliberately buried a scientific truth. But sometimes, the crime is the exact opposite. Sometimes, a monumental truth is stolen in plain sight, and its creator is erased from history. The Ghost in the Machine. This grainy, X-shaped image is known as Photo 51. It is one of the most important photographs ever taken because it was the final, critical clue that unlocked the secret of life itself. But the story behind it is not one of triumph, it's the story of a scientific heist and of the ghost who was written out of her own legacy. The ghost's name was Rosalind Franklin. In the early 1950s, she was a brilliant and meticulous chemist working at King's College London, using a technique called X-ray crystallography to map the structure of the DNA molecule. It was painstaking, frustrating work. After over 100 hours of careful X-ray exposure, she captured Photo 51, an image of unprecedented clarity. The sharp dark cross at its center was a revelation, a perfect shadow of the molecule of life. It was her data, her breakthrough, her discovery. Meanwhile, at Cambridge University, two other scientists, James Watson and Francis Crick, were also chasing DNA's structure. They were ambitious and brilliant, but they were stuck. They had theories, but no hard evidence to prove them. That changed when Franklin's estranged colleague, Maurice Wilkins, did the unthinkable. Without Franklin's knowledge or consent, he took her unpublished research, her Photo 51, and showed it to James Watson. For Watson, seeing the image was a lightning bolt. The distinct X pattern was the smoking gun, irrefutable proof that the molecule had to be a double helix. Using Franklin's data as their guide, Watson and Crick rapidly built their famous model and rushed to publish. In their world-changing 1953 paper, they buried her critical contribution in a footnote, framing her work as simply confirming their theory, not as the foundational evidence it truly was. In 1962, Watson, Crick, and Wilkins were awarded the Nobel Prize, Rosalind Franklin received nothing. She had died 4 years earlier of ovarian cancer, her life likely cut short by the very radiation she used to change the world. Her photograph gave humanity the key to its own code, but the men who used it effectively erased her name from the book of life. It proves that a legacy can be stolen as easily as an object, leaving the question, how many of history's great men stand on the shoulders of forgotten women? Rosalind Franklin's dark secret was hidden from the world in the quiet corridors of a university. But our next subject's secret was blasted across the front pages of every newspaper, a story of genius and brutal violence. The killer who froze time. These famous photographs settled a scientific debate and became the foundation for the entire motion picture industry. They are the work of a methodical genius, a man obsessed with capturing objective truth. What the history books often leave out is that shortly before he created them, Edward Muybridge hunted down his wife's lover, shot him through the heart, and got away with murder. The story begins in 1872 with a question that captivated the Gilded Age. When a horse gallops, do all 4 of its hooves ever leave the ground at once? The motion was too fast for the human eye to register. To solve the riddle, the wealthy industrialist Leland Stanford hired Muybridge, an eccentric but brilliant photographer. Muybridge devised a revolutionary system, a bank of 12 cameras lining a racetrack, their shutters triggered in sequence by tripwires. It was a way to dissect an instant, to freeze a moment into its component parts. But before he could perfect his invention, Muybridge's carefully controlled world shattered. He discovered that his young wife, Flora, was having an affair with a charming drama critic named Major Harry Larkins. Muybridge was not a man given to fits of rage. His response was cold and methodical. He tracked Larkins to a remote cabin, called him to the door, and calmly said, "My name is Muybridge, and I have a message from my wife." Then he fired a single, fatal shot. The subsequent trial was a media sensation. Muybridge never denied the act. His lawyer argued it was justifiable homicide, a defense that resonated with the frontier justice of the American West. In a stunning verdict, the jury acquitted him. After a brief self-imposed exile, he returned to California and, with a chilling focus, resumed his work. In 1878, his system worked perfectly. The resulting photographs proved conclusively that a galloping horse is, for a split second, completely airborne. He had not just solved a bet, he had invented the technology that would lead directly to cinema. His story reveals the terrifying duality of the human mind, forcing us to wonder, can a person be both a monster and a genius at the exact same time? Muybridge used his camera to reveal a truth hidden from the human eye. But our next photograph did the opposite. It created a powerful illusion that convinced an entire generation a face was waiting for them on another world. The Martian Mirror. In 1976, NASA's Viking 1 orbiter was mapping the surface of Mars, searching for a safe place to land. When this photograph was beamed back to Earth, scientists saw the impossible, a face nearly 2 miles long, staring up at them from the red dust. For decades, it was touted as the ultimate proof that we were not alone. Located in a region called Cydonia, the formation was breathtaking. It seemed to show 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, and a sort of headdress, all perfectly symmetrical. It looked ancient, weathered, and distinctly artificial. NASA scientists quickly dismissed it as a trick of light and shadow on a natural landform, but it was too late. The image was released to the public and it detonated in the global consciousness. It became a cultural phenomenon, spawning books, documentaries, and a legion of believers who saw it not as a rock, but as a monument, a message from a long-dead Martian civilization. But the real story of the face on Mars isn't about aliens, it's about us. The monster wasn't on Mars, it was inside our own heads. The phenomenon is called pareidolia, the human brain's powerful, innate tendency to find familiar patterns, especially faces, in random data. It's an evolutionary survival trait that allows us to recognize a friend in a crowd or a predator in the bushes. But this system is so aggressive, it often creates false positives. We see a man in the moon or animals in the clouds for the same reason the world saw a face in a Martian mountain. The low resolution of the Viking camera, combined with shadows that perfectly mimicked facial features, created the ideal raw material for our brains to work with. For 22 years, the illusion held. Then in 1998, the Mars Global Surveyor flew over Cydonia with a camera 10 times more powerful. The new images were unambiguous. From a different angle and with better light, the face dissolved into what it had always been, a heavily eroded, unremarkable hill. The photo is a chilling reminder that our senses are not perfect instruments. If our own minds are wired to deceive us with such ease, what can we ever truly believe is real? The face on Mars was an accidental illusion created by our own minds. But sometimes, an illusion isn't an accident. Sometimes, it's a deliberate, calculated lie, crafted by a single person to fool the entire world. The lie in the lake. For 60 years, this grainy photograph was the definitive proof that monsters were real. It launched 1,000 expeditions, captivated the world, and transformed a quiet Scottish lake into a global landmark. But the most monstrous thing about the surgeon's photograph was not the creature in the water, but the sheer audacity of the lie it represented. When it was published in the London Daily Mail in 1934, the image was an instant sensation. The photo was credited to Colonel Robert Wilson, a highly respected surgeon, a fact that gave it an immediate and powerful air of authenticity. The long, serpentine neck and small head perfectly matched the public's imagination of a surviving plesiosaur. For decades, this single image was the bedrock of cryptozoology, the anchor for an entire field of monster hunting. It was simply too good, and its source too credible, to be dismissed. But the photograph wasn't a lucky shot, it was a cold-blooded act of revenge. The true mastermind was a big-game hunter named Marmaduke Wetherell. A year earlier, the Daily Mail had hired Wetherell to find the beast, but he had returned in disgrace after his evidence, a set of large footprints, was exposed as a crude hoax made with a dried hippo's foot. Humiliated and furious, Wetherell vowed to get even. He would give the newspaper the monster they wanted, but it would be a lie so perfect it would ruin them. He enlisted his stepson, a skilled model maker, who bought a 14-inch toy submarine and sculpted a head and neck from wood putty. They took their creation to a quiet bay in the loch, photographed it, and then passed the plates to the respectable surgeon to serve as their frontman. The trap was set. The newspaper took the bait, and Wetherell's revenge became a global myth. The lie held for 6 decades. Finally, in 1994, the last surviving member of the conspiracy confessed on his deathbed, revealing the entire petty scheme. The world's most famous monster was nothing more than a child's toy, animated by a burning desire for vengeance. If a lie this simple can fool the world for 60 years, how many of the truths we accept every day are just stories we've been told? The Loch Ness Monster was a hoax that preyed on our desire to see something magical in our own world. But our next photograph is the opposite. A completely real image of our world that revealed a truth so overwhelming, it could change the very structure of the human mind. The Blue Marble. On December 7, 1972, the crew of Apollo 17, on their way to the moon, took this photograph. Known as the Blue Marble, it is the first clear, fully illuminated picture of the whole Earth ever captured by a human hand. It became an icon of peace and unity, but for the few who have seen this sight with their own eyes, it often reveals a far more isolating and terrifying truth. When the image was released, it fundamentally changed how we saw our world. In the midst of the Cold War and a burgeoning environmental movement, this picture of a perfect, cloud-swirled sphere made political borders and national conflicts seem utterly absurd. For the first time, humanity saw its home not as a collection of separate countries, but as a single, living, interconnected system. It was a beautiful, humbling portrait of our shared existence, a cosmic perspective that inspired a generation. But there is a darker side to this revelation. It's a psychological phenomenon known as the overview effect. On Earth, our world feels solid, stable, and infinite. From the vantage point of space, that illusion shatters. Astronauts describe seeing the Earth's atmosphere not as a vast, endless sky, but as a fragile, paper-thin film, a delicate blue line protecting all of life from the absolute zero of the void. They see Earth itself as a small, impossibly lonely object, a fragile lifeboat adrift in an infinite, hostile blackness. The experience is a profound paradox. The beauty of seeing humanity as a single entity is matched by the terror of seeing its profound vulnerability. Many astronauts speak of a cognitive dissonance, a sense of both cosmic connection and crushing isolation. They are overwhelmed by the beauty of our world and simultaneously horrified by how precarious it all is. A tiny, living jewel in a truly endless night. The blue marble is a photograph of home. But it's also a portrait of our beautiful prison, a picture that reminds us that everything we have ever known and ever will know is on that one fragile sphere. It is a perfect portrait of everything we are, leaving one terrifying thought: what happens if we fail to protect the only home we will ever have? The blue marble is a photograph that showed us the fragility of our own existence. But our next image looks even further out, to the very edge of reality, to capture a portrait of cosmic annihilation. Staring into the void, this blurry, imperfect ring of light is one of the most profound images ever captured. It took a global network of telescopes, a virtual lens the size of planet Earth, to take this picture. What it shows is humanity's first direct look at the silhouette of a monster, an object of such terrifying power it was once believed to be only a mathematical ghost, a supermassive black hole. The target was a cosmic behemoth in the galaxy Messier 87, 55 million light-years away. Capturing an image of it was considered a monumental, almost impossible feat, equivalent to photographing a single orange on the surface of the Moon from Earth. To do it, scientists created the Event Horizon Telescope, linking 8 radio observatories across the planet from the volcanoes of Hawaii to the ice of the South Pole and synchronizing them with atomic clocks. For days, this global eye stared into the void, collecting so many petabytes of data that it had to be physically flown on hard drives to be processed. And when the final image resolved on their screens after years of work, it wasn't just a scientific breakthrough, it was a moment of profound existential awe. For the first time, humanity was staring into the eye of the abyss. What they captured is not the black hole itself that is impossible. A black hole is a point of infinite density where gravity is so extreme that nothing, not even light, can escape. It is a perfect, invisible black. The glowing ring we see is the matter trapped in its final moments, an accretion disk of gas and dust, superheated to billions of degrees and accelerated to near the speed of light as it swirls around the abyss. The dark circle in the center is the event horizon, the point of no return. It is the shadow the monster casts on the universe. For a century, this was an object that existed only in the equations of Albert Einstein. This photograph dragged it out of the realm of theory and into reality. The object at the center of this image has a mass 6.5 billion times that of our Sunday. It is a tear in the fabric of space-time, a one-way exit from our universe where all the laws of physics cease to exist. Now that we know such cosmic monsters are real, what does it say about our own significance in a universe that can create objects that devour light and time itself? For the first time, we have seen the edge of the void, a place of pure physical horror. But not all horrors are cosmic. Some are far more intimate, born not from the laws of physics, but from the quiet desperation of the human heart. The children who fooled the world. In the summer of 1917, with the world drowning in the mechanized slaughter of the First World War, 2 young cousins in the English village of Cottingley produced a series of astonishing photographs. They appeared to show the impossible, real, winged fairies dancing and playing in the sun-dappled woods. For decades, these images would offer hope to a grieving world, hiding a secret that was far more human and, in its own way, far more terrifying. The photographs landed in a nation desperate to believe. Britain was awash in grief, and spiritualism was on the rise as millions sought comfort from the ghosts of their lost sons, brothers, and fathers. People were searching for an escape, for any proof of a world beyond their brutal reality. Into this void came the photos from Elsie Wright and Frances Griffiths, 2 girls who claimed they played with fairies at the bottom of their garden. The images were soon examined by photographic experts who, unable to find any evidence of tampering, declared them genuine. The story reached its peak when it gained its most famous and unlikely champion, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. The creator of the ruthlessly logical Sherlock Holmes was, ironically, a fervent believer in the supernatural, a conviction hardened by the death of his own son. He saw the photographs not as a childish prank, but as the first scientific proof of a spiritual plane. He staked his enormous public reputation on their authenticity, and if the man who invented the world's greatest detective was convinced, The public was enthralled. The mystery endured for over 60 years. Then, in the early 1980s, the two women, now elderly, finally confessed. The fairies were not magical beings. They were cardboard cutouts, meticulously copied by Elsie from a children's book and cleverly propped up with hat pins. It was a simple prank that had spun wildly out of control, fueled by a world that needed it to be true. The Cottingley Fairies case is not a story about a clever hoax. It is a story about the awesome power of collective grief. It serves as the ultimate warning. What comforting lies are we, right now, choosing to believe instead of facing a difficult truth? From the depths of a poisoned lake to the edge of the universe, each of these photographs holds a secret. They remind us that for every beautiful image, there's a story in the shadows, and that the most terrifying thing a picture can show us is a reflection of ourselves. What other secrets are hiding in plain sight? Let us know in the comments, and subscribe for more stories hidden behind the lens.